Okay, having acquired the knowledge inside the performance hierarchy, principally CSFs and KPIs, what is now required, if you like, is to sort of say, look, well, how do you answer a question? Large questions come later. Full questions come later in the course. For the time being, we're going to look at a mini exercise, what I've called here an application exercise. And what that's going to show you is how you answer a question inside the performance hierarchy, how you apply yourself, because application skills are really important in this, and how you must be careful to justify statements that you make. Because remember, problem with performance management is there's no legal or regulatory backup for anything that we say. There's no IFRSs, there's no law. So statements that you make must be justified. And this is a skill that you need to learn how to do. So this is the exercise I've picked out. Why don't you pause the video just for a second, just to give that quick read, and then I'll carry on. Now, this is an absolute classic type of question where what we're asked to do here is to evaluate, that word there, evaluate, the quality of a KPI, as a performance measure. So somewhere in this, we're going to get a KPI, we've got to evaluate. Evaluation is an assessment of the quality. I want your opinion. What do you think about how good this KPI is or how bad it is? Let's look at the scenario here. The parcel delivery business targets 99% on-time deliveries as the key metric. So that's the KPI that we're being asked to evaluate. 99% on-time deliveries. And helpfully, what I've done here is say, look, on time is defined as being within 5 minutes of a scheduled delivery time. You've got to think about that. What do you feel about that? Because an evaluation is very much your opinion. There's no IFRS here. You can't make bland statements. You've got to have an opinion and you've got to be able to justify your statements. Yeah, it says also here, this is the only metric used as the MD believes in keeping things simple, providing a clear focus for the staff. And, who's to argue about that? Keeping things simple is probably sensible. But what do you think about the idea that it is the only metric? Now, first stage to this is to first of all decide, okay, what are the things in this question that I need to talk about within my evaluation? So again, pause the video and I want you to pick out 3 things that you think merit evaluation, merit a comment. Now, I hope you did that. Let's have a look at this. I think the 99% merits a comment. It seems to me, in my opinion, that's very high. 99% success rate. I think success rates have to be high, but whether 99% is high enough, is too high, I think is meriting a comment. I think the 5 minutes thing is also a specific in the question that probably merits communication, merits an evaluation. Do you think that's too tight? I think that's too tight. 5 minutes is nothing. I think customers would feel that 5 minutes is nothing. You'd be super impressed if someone arrived within 5 minutes of a predicted delivery time. But my word, is it necessary? That's a question. And lastly, I think this on time being the only metric is probably something that merits a communication. And in some ways, that's the first skill. Yeah, we have to evaluate a KPI. The KPI is given. Which parts of the KPI strike you as interesting? So identification of key facts is the first important skill that you need to be able to pass APM. So I've got 99%, I've got 5 minutes, and I've got on time is the only metric. Notice all those come straight out of the question. None of them come from a textbook. Has to be like that because APM is about whether or not a particular performance management system or management system is appropriate in a given scenario. So the answers have to be in the question, or points that the examiner wants you to talk about have to be in the question. You don't need lots and lots and lots of textbook knowledge. You must apply yourself. Obviously, knowledge is important. You need to remember from the study notes that you've already looked at that a good KPI should be specific, a good KPI should be measurable, a good KPI should be achievable, relevant, time-based, controllable, ideally, cheap to operate, etc., etc. You need to remember that, but please don't write all that down because APM is about evaluating what's in front of you. And only some of those points in the SMART mnemonic, if you remember that, might be relevant in this particular case. So you must drive your thought processes through the question as opposed to from the textbook. Textbook knowledge sits in the background while you say, okay, what's in this question? What do I need to comment on? So what I'm going to do first of all is show you the sentence that I would write about the 99%. And this will score 1 mark because in APM, you get 1 mark per point that you make. So my answer to the 99% is as follows. I'm going to say that the 1% failure rate, which is obviously the opposite of a 99% success rate, the 1% failure rate, I think, is too ambitious. That is my statement. I can't say things like that without justification. Who says it's too ambitious? I've got to prove it with a sentence. And I've come then to the second part of my sentence to say, okay, adverse weather, incorrectly addressed parcels could easily delay delivery more frequently than that. That's my justification. It doesn't have to be done that way round. Statement, then justification. That just happens to be the way that I've written this one. But that works for me. 1% failure rate is too ambitious. If I stop there, no marks. No marks. Not justified. Justification, adverse weather, incorrectly addressed parcels. Obviously, I could come up with 4 or 5 different reasons why a parcel might be late. Don't do that. Come up with a couple, maybe even only one sometimes. That'll be enough. Yeah, and that could delay delivery more frequently. Statement with justification. Now that is only 20 words. The vast majority of people would probably write more words than that. 30 words is probably okay, 35 words is probably okay. But if you're taking 100 words to make that sentence, then you're too wordy. You want to be scoring marks, I would argue, every 30 to 35 words is a maximum. Short paragraphs is the key to APM. Okay. What about the 5 minutes? I think that's very tight. Why don't you pause the video for a moment? Tell me what you think. Write down what you think. But don't forget, if you do make that statement, you must justify with a reason. Okay, I hope you've had a go at that, if you like. Well, let's have a see. 5 minutes seems a narrow tolerance. That's my statement. That's what I think. Justification, staff might see this as unfair and take unnecessary risks to deliver quickly. Now, I could critique myself there and say, well, maybe what do I mean by unnecessary risks? In my head, I'm thinking dangerous driving. But maybe that's enough. Maybe just saying unnecessary risk to deliver quickly is perfectly okay. I do think 5 minutes is too narrow a target. I do think it's unfair. Yeah, and I do think that what will happen is that the drivers will take risks to deliver quickly. That's less words than before, And I can't stress this enough. To be able to score a mark every 17, 18 words is extraordinarily difficult to do unless you're a very, very, very good writer. Yeah, and I think I am a good writer. Been writing for a long, long time in exam environments. Yeah, you shouldn't be too strict with yourself. If you can do that in 25 to 30 to 35 words, that's fine. Just don't take 70 or 80 words to do that. What about the last one? Pause the video again. What about on time as the only metric? Do you think that is appropriate, and why? Okay. Well, I've said I recognise, or whilst being on time is important, surely the condition of the parcel when delivered is also important. So I'm trying to flush out this idea that measuring on time only is a mistake, and the condition of the parcel would also be important. That's my statement. That's not mark earning. I've got to justify. I think customers will expect parcels to be undamaged and left in a safe place if they're out when delivery takes place. So that second part again is my justification. I don't always write it that way around. Don't try and write like someone else writes, but you need a statement and you need a justification. And if you do both those things, yeah, then you'll score a mark. If you do that 50 times, you'll pass. And talking about marks, that answer is worth 3 marks. Yeah, obviously you'd have to derive that through how many marks were available in the question, but I'm going to tell you that I think when I wrote this, it was 3, and therefore there's a mark here, there's a mark here, and there's a mark here, and that's 100 marks, 100%. Yeah, that is right. There's no more you need. That last paragraph, of course, is slightly longer, but it's hardly wordy. I think there's about 35 words there. Yeah, perfectly acceptable. You can do that in the exam time. Yeah, so that is your application exercise. Notice you didn't need to regurgitate the conditions for a good KPI. That sat in the background of your mind. You can use those if you want to. Yeah, but I'm answering the question. Is this KPI a good one? I can see there's 3 specifics in the question. I've tackled each of them. That's all you need to do to pass. So that completes the first application exercise.